Hello. I can't remember the last time I actually had a book prop to hold up during one of these, but since the Phantom of the Opera episode of Wishbone is one of the subjects of this video, my copy of the book, one of my copies of the book, I have three, this is the only one I have here in New York, um, will be joining me. This translation, by the way, Mireille Ribière, I really liked it. The Wishbone episode is called Panton at the Opera, which is a nice pun title. And then the other episode I'll be talking about is Dances with Dogs, which is a play on the title Dances with Wolves, because the episode is about Native American storytelling traditions more broadly, but it focuses on the story that it's told is specifically a Dakota story, specifically the Dakota people who lived in Minnesota at one time. So, but I will get to that in another time, and I'll try not to talk too much about the Phantom of the Opera because I could talk too much about the Phantom of the Opera. So it's actually the Wishbone version, the dramatization of Phantom within the episode, is a pretty solid distillation for kids of the story, except for at the very beginning, Wishbone says the opera ghost was a big opera fan, and in a way, perhaps he was. Obviously, he attended all the operas in Box 5, and he wrote his own operas, but they kind of leave you with the impression that that's why he was there, and I'm not going to go into why he's actually there. Read the book and look it up, but he's got other reasons for hiding in the opera house. It's not just that he's a big fan of opera, but other than that, good dialogue. I think this was my first exposure to the story of the Phantom of the Opera. The episode originally aired, let me just see, in 1995. My memory of it is, and 1995 was before I knew anything about the musical. My memory of seeing it is I came home from getting allergy shots after school, and it was on. That is my first memory of Wishbone, but somehow I saw all the previous episodes as well, so maybe the Phantom of the Opera Wishbone just stuck with me more than the others because, for the same reason that the musical later would, and the book. It's a very weird book, but again, a good distillation, and I kind of sensed some inspiration from the musical. Hard to say for certain, but anyway, I wrote down a couple of lines that I liked, but the non-Phantom of the Opera story is, and I don't have to go over the Phantom of the Opera story, everybody knows it. Christine is an opera singer, the Phantom is her teacher, Raoul is in love with her, and it's a love triangle. And Wishbone plays Raoul, not the Phantom, which I guess similar to the Three Musketeers episode, the little documentary at the end saying don't put makeup on your pets. Maybe they did the mustaches on Wishbone for the Musketeer episode and they thought we're not going to put Phantom makeup on him. But also the Phantom is not in the story very much. In the 2.5-hour musical, the Phantom is on stage for 40 minutes. The classic monsters of literature did not dominate the text that made them famous. And so the Phantom does not. It's more the mystery of where they are, who they are, what they're doing to the Christine and Raoul in this case. But the outside of Phantom of the Opera story is that Joe's mom, Ellen, the reference librarian in Oakdale, is computerizing the library's reference catalog. And the catalog had been assembled by a man named Ezra Knutson, who was the reference librarian before her and had retired, I guess, 10 years earlier. And she gets some media attention for doing this, and then Knutson's catalog starts disappearing volume by volume, and it's a mystery who's doing it. And meanwhile, a man who claims to be the reference librarian and looks a lot like Ezra Knutson shows up in the library and helps Sam, David, and Joe find some books on history of rock and roll and advises them to read about blues and country music as well, I think. Um, and this was one thing that confused me. He introduces himself as the reference librarian, and that is why they start investigating, is Mr. Knutson somehow back, because they had recently received a letter that said that he had died. So, for all intents and purposes, he is believed to be dead. Um, but it's one of those things where if they don't have that, then there's no story. So I guess he has to do that, but it does seem like a mistake because it sets them on his trail, because it's easily provable that he is not currently the reference librarian. So then the question becomes, why would he refer to himself as the reference librarian? So a line I wrote down. I wrote down that is this the second appearance of the library? I don't remember. I know the library was in the Digging Up the Past episode where that woman who lived in Joe's house came back to Oakdale. I don't know if the library figures into most of the episodes as a set. But they walk into the library, and Ellen says, what brings you here? And they mention the research, but before they do, the voice of Wishbone says, Alicia, Ellen, how did you get here? Which is a cute line. I have fond memories of the line. And then another line that I liked, after when they go to Ellen and say, we met this guy who said he was the reference librarian, but you're the reference librarian. And they all go back home to Joe's house, where Ellen shows them newspaper or evidence of who Ezra Knutson was, and explains, but his wife told us that he was dead. Then she gets a phone call and says there's something she needs to see at the library. They all get up to go back to the library, and Wishbone says, hey, Wishbone, want to come along? Okay, sure. So I really liked that line. They get back to the library. Another volume of the catalog has been stolen, and there's the classic whodunit question of who could have done it. And the voice of Wishbone says, well, it wasn't a dog. We're not allowed in here, which had been, Ellen had said earlier, dogs are not allowed. I just love all these lines. But I think that's the last one. So in addition to the volume of the catalog being stolen, there is a very threatening message written on, not very threatening, but it's just a threatening thing to happen. The message itself, give back what you have stolen, abandon your project. Ellen, I think the picture of her in the magazine is crossed out. It's not a particularly threatening message, just saying stop what you're doing, no consequences, but it's written in red marker and her picture's crossed out. It's pretty threatening, just as an act. And of course, it being so threatening, she reacts by she's going to stay in the library overnight in case he comes back to steal more, because they determine that since he didn't use the front door because he would have been seen, that he must have a key to the library, and they assume he's going to come back at night. And they all decide to stay the night. Wanda has a ridiculous security alarm collection that impresses the police officer who is stationed to stay at the library with them in case something happens. I wrote down, did they hire singers? I don't know the core Wishbone acting troupe. I don't know if they were all just singers naturally. They aren't often asked to sing, and like when Bacchus sings in the King Midas episode, it's not like Broadway singing, it's character singing on a children's television show, which is not bad, but it's not Phantom of the Opera singing. So I just wondered if they specifically hired singers for this episode to be in the opera, or if they just, I forgot to check who the actor is who plays Christine and the actor who plays Carlotta, but everybody plays so many roles in the Wishbone acting troupe. Maybe those two in particular could sing. I think I recognized them from other episodes, but it just occurred to me. And just a note while I'm talking about singing, the opening tune, What's the Story, Wishbone, very clever song. I really like it, and I think that there's like a children's chorus kind of background singing. Like I think there's adult singers are the main line, but it sounds like there's a very young children's choir in the background. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. So all of that, and of course, it is the guy he didn't fake his death, but he sent the letter saying that he had died, so it wouldn't be suspected. And then later he's got a line that says he's got to get back to his wife before she accidentally learns of his death. He retired and moved to Florida. So a couple more notes. These to do with the Phantom of the Opera thing. The makeup is kind of like purple face putty, which until I saw the Broadway makeup was all that I knew of how the Phantom looks under the mask. So, and it's pretty scary, but it's not. It looks cheap once you've seen what they do on Broadway. But better at least than what they did in the adaptation of the Broadway musical. When Christine disappears from the stage at the climax of Phantom, Wishbone jumps from the balcony to the stage, which is what John Wilkes Booth did after he shot Lincoln. He jumped from the balcony to the stage. And Wishbone, fortunately, does not break his leg or twist his ankle or whatever happened to Booth. And there's mist in the hall leading to the Phantom's lair, but there's no lake, as there is in other adaptations, including the musical. And I understand why, but it still would have been cute to see Wishbone doggy paddling through the lake to get to the Phantom's lair. It's a great climactic scene with the Phantom, and it ends as it does with Christine promising to come back to visit the Phantom. So that is the episode. It's a very good episode, obviously one of my favorites, and that's pretty much all that I have to say about it. Well, not all, but I could go on for too long. And so the next one, Dances with Dogs, another in two ways. Another where it's a little weird, given how we like to cast things today, knowing that the little white dog is voiced by a white guy, and playing a young brave is what Wikipedia says. But as with the Mexican Legends episode, it is not narrated by the voice of Wishbone. It's narrated by the character of Lee. I wrote down his Natonaba, something like that. Lee Natonaba, who is played by an Apache actor, but again, the legend that he's telling, the story of the Deathless Voice is a legend from the Dakota tribe that lived in Minnesota. So I don't know what the actor is supposed to be, or what the character of Lee is supposed to be. I didn't quite catch that. But it is interesting, and I forget if they did it. I think they might have done it in the Anansi episode too, that they have the voice of, because like the Mexican Legends and the African American folk tales episodes, it's about storytelling. And in this case, the episode is about, well, he's in town to do an annual storytelling event, and he wants to share the experience of storytelling. He talks about how the art of storytelling isn't about the storyteller, it's not about the performer, it's about the story and passing on the story, and knowing that this is the same story that was told throughout history to generations and generations this same way. Or it evolved, but it evolved through the oral tradition. And so all of those are about that. And so it's interesting that they then, those people, those actors playing those storytelling characters get to do the narration that would normally be done by Wishbone. So maybe they were more aware of making sure that they did things right than I gave them credit for previously. In this particular case, he also mentions the tradition of kitchen table stories. He says that Lee, the character who's visiting Joe and Ellen, he says that the kitchen table is the best place to tell stories. And hence they say, well, why don't you tell us a story now? And that's where he starts the story of the Deathless Voice. And I wasn't sure, reading the description of this episode, that I had seen it, but a couple of things I remembered. A line that says, "Too bad Wishbone can't talk," which is an ironic line, which he also follows with, in many Native American legends, the human characters are the ignorant ones and animals do the talking. and I don't know how true that is because I'm not an expert in that, but it rings true in any case. Um, but he says, "Too bad Wishbone can't talk." And I'm thinking you have no idea Wishbone had a snappy comeback. I forget the exact nature of it. Um, and then, where was I going with that? Oh, the other thing that I remembered, the story of the Deathless Voice is there's a Dakota war party, I guess, and Wishbone is just one of the guys, and they are traveling through the woods, and they hear a war song, and they go in search of it, and to find the source because they think it's their enemy, and what they find is the remains of a warrior at the base of a large tree, and so it's a rib cage and one bone, and then the rib cage and bone rise up into the air, and the image of that warrior singing comes into focus. And I remembered that scene, so I guess I have seen this episode. And then there were other elements, but when I was the age where I was seeing Wishbone, I was still into Native American culture and history. I took a Native American art class, very, very basic kid art types of things. I really liked The Indian in the Cupboard. The movie I hadn't read. Well, actually, my mom was reading the books to us. And whenever in history or social studies classes we would talk about the Iroquois, I really liked that because the Iroquois were the tribes, the nation of tribes that lived in the area where I grew up. So I always really enjoyed that. But I apparently have seen this episode. But the outside of the legend story, Lee wants other people to tell stories. He doesn't want to be the only one telling stories at the event that he's putting on. He wants someone in the audience to tell stories, and so Joe volunteers. And Joe says he wants to tell stories about his dad. Then the problem arises when he starts learning more about his dad, who he barely knew. I guess he was 6 when his dad died. His dad was a very impressive person, achieved a lot of things, and Joe starts to get intimidated, like he's got to live up to it, which eventually Ellen explains he doesn't have to outperform his dad in life. He doesn't have to be intimidated by his dad. He has to be the continuation of his dad's story, because he is the continuation of his dad's story. He's what his father left behind to go on in the world and represent him. So that's a good message for kids. Let's see, anything else? Wishbone, even in the character, not narrating the story, the character Wishbone plays hardly speaks at all, because it's more about the story being told and not the story being not note and not dialogue. The end of the legend has, I guess, the Wishbone character doesn't do it, or we don't hear him do it, but at the end, when the war party returns to camp, or returns home, it is explained that now the young brave, the Wishbone character, has to tell the story of what they experienced, and also teach the song that the ghost of the warrior was singing the song, so that it would be remembered. And now that the war party, including the Wishbone brave, has to pass on that song, tell the story of finding it, same thing with Joe. We don't hear the story that Joe tells about his dad, but the idea is that he's keeping his dad alive, both by being his dad's son and telling his dad's story. I wrote down, is there anything in the program? When they're before the final scenes, they're folding programs for the event, and there's a very nice cover. It's pointed out how nice the cover is. Apparently Wanda did the cover, but there doesn't seem to be any writing in the programs. And I already mentioned how Lee emphasizes that it's the story, not the storyteller, that's important. So that's that for those 2 episodes. And now on to the last 2 episodes of Season 1. The episode 39, based on a Russian play called The Inspector General, And then episode 40, I probably won't have too much to say about because it's picks. It's called Picks of the Litter, and it is various. It's gonna be a highlight reel of season 1, and so I will watch it. I will mention which ones, and I will mention if I thought they were the best clips. But I probably won't say too much about it. And then on to season 2, which is a third or a fourth as long as season 1. And in the meantime, let's wag another tail.